Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Stellar Development Foundation's second quarterly call of 2021. We're glad you could be here with us. I'm Carolyn Yee, Communications Manager at SDF, and I'll be your host today as we take you through everything we've achieved since Q1. So today you'll hear from three of SDF's leaders, our CEO and Executive Director, Danelle Dixon, General Counsel, Candace Kelly, and our Head of Ecosystem, Justin Rice. Danelle is going to start us off by sharing some highlights from Q2 and then begin the overview of how we're doing on our 2021 roadmap, specifically for fostering sustainable use cases. Then Candace will pick up on what we're doing to be the blockchain people know and trust, namely in our marketing and communications efforts and in our broader legal and regulatory engagement. And then lastly, Justin will walk us through the network's growth metrics and some exciting technical updates from this quarter. And we'll of course have time for Q&A at the very end. So please feel free to submit your questions throughout the presentation into the Q&A bar on your Q&A tab on your toolbar. So with that, I will hand it over to Danelle.
Thanks, Carolyn. Welcome, everybody. We really enjoy doing these calls every quarter, and we appreciate you taking the time to engage with us. So we're going to cover a lot today, and I want to kick us off by sharing some of our Q2 highlights. We'll get more into the details throughout the presentation, but this is just a snapshot. So first, this was our biggest quarter ever for enterprise fund investments. We invested a total of 18 million, bringing our year-to-date total to 24.5 million. We completed two notable core protocol upgrades, 16 and 17. And the CAP committee also voted to move forward with the proposal that would introduce automated market makers, or AMMs, on Stellar. So Justin's going to share more about each of those topics as we get to him. So make sure you stay tuned until the end of the presentation. The Stellar Community Fund, now in version 3.0, and is bigger and better than ever. And Stellar Quest Series 3 saw participation from over 1,500 developers. And we've expanded the SDF team to help accomplish much of this work. We're now at 87 team members around the globe. So this growing team has been guided by our strategic pillars. These pillars were published in our 2020 roadmap at the start of the year. These are the same pillars that have guided us since 2019. Along with putting them out there publicly, it is also important for SDF that we hold ourselves accountable and share our progress quarterly. So, as a reminder, the three pillars are fostering and developing sustainable Stellar use cases, helping Stellar be the blockchain that people know and trust, and supporting the robustness and usability of Stellar. We mapped out specific aims under each pillar, anchored around growing Stellar in meaningful ways. Growth of the number of entities building on Stellar, growth of relevant transaction volumes on Stellar, and growth of the number of people that know about Stellar. So together, these guide us on the path to addressing SDF's vision of creating equitable access to the global financial system. So let's get started by diving into what we've been doing this quarter to foster sustainable use cases on Stellar. In early May, Tala and Visa announced a partnership to bring blockchain solutions to emerging markets and expand access to financial services. This partnership, supported by Circle and SDF, will enable Tala customers to access Stellar USDC through their digital wallets, allowing them to securely store their money, make payments, and spend their USDC at any of the 70 million merchants worldwide that accept Visa. Since we're talking about this partnership in the context of fostering sustainable use cases, I think it's important to explain what that would mean for an underbanked person in an emerging market. So this individual may have a steady income, but is still transacting mostly in cash and relying on informal, sometimes predatory services. They can't use a bank to borrow. They have no credit history. They can't use a bank to save. They'd face minimum balance requirements and hidden penalties. They can't use the bank to pay bills or send remittances. They'd be gouged with high transaction fees. And they can't use a bank to protect against the financial shocks or emergencies. They're not deemed worthy of having insurance. This new solution would enable a Tala customer to receive USDC from family members overseas directly to their Tala wallet, with virtually no transfer fees. They could store their USDC in their local currency. They could seamlessly spend it on household goods through their Visa card, or easily get cash locally. The Stellar ecosystem will provide on and off ramps to and from the local fiat, which will enable Tala customers to bridge digital and traditional financial rails much more seamlessly. This is an example of how partnerships are bringing faster and more affordable access to financial services at scale by leveraging the Stellar network. And speaking of exciting partnership updates, let's revisit our work with the Ukrainian financial institutions, which kicked off at the start of the year. So in Q1, we announced our partnership with Ukraine's Ministry of Digital Transformation to collaborate on a virtual asset strategy in Ukraine. The country is at a formative point in its journey. Forthcoming legislation is expected to provide clarity that will inform the development of Ukraine's virtual asset industry. Financial institutions may see new opportunities to utilize virtual assets, and key players in Ukraine will make consequential decisions that shape the country's ecosystem in the months ahead. So SDF's goals in the process is to support Ukrainian leaders to leverage blockchain technology and deliver meaningful infrastructure and solutions to all of the constituents. So to that end, in May, we convened a 2-day event to connect leaders from Ukrainian financial institutions and the banking market and experts from the blockchain and virtual asset industry. It was co-hosted by the Ministry of Digital Transformation and the Association of Ukrainian Banks, and included the participation of the National Bank of Ukraine. Leaders from every major Ukrainian financial institution and the National Bank of Ukraine were in attendance. This was our opportunity to provide practical information to key stakeholders and decision makers in Ukraine who will be involved in issuing, regulating, and developing infrastructure for virtual assets. Industry leaders building on Stellar shared real-world use cases and practical learnings on subjects like compliance, anti-money laundering, tokenization, and digital currency management systems. And in June, we were honored to accept an invitation to join the Association of Ukrainian Banks as a member. It is the oldest organization of its kind in Ukraine and makes it possible for a wide spectrum of banks and financial institutions, those that are large and those that are small, those that are national and those that are multinational, to join forces and help steer the future of financial services in the country. We are its first international member, as well as its first member that is not a financial institution. So SDF will serve as an independent advisor for the 45 existing members, which include banks, exchanges, and insurance companies. The relationships and progress we've made in Ukraine are a good proof point for the importance of public and private partnerships that we talk about all the time in this industry, and why at SDF we focus so much on facilitating these conversations. Open dialogue and collaboration are key to building healthy virtual asset ecosystems in new countries and regions. It's really exciting to be part of this process, and it's been a great opportunity to introduce leaders to the Stellar ecosystem. So next, let's shift gears to focus on the private sector. We're really thrilled to report 2 new enterprise fund investments this quarter. This is another way we're working to foster sustainable use cases, specifically by supporting new and existing companies building on Stellar. In Q2, we continued to exceed our goal of having at least 1 investment per quarter, investing in 2 companies for a total of $18 million. The first investment was $3 million in Tribal Credit. Tribal is a fintech that provides financial services to small and medium enterprises, SMEs, in emerging markets. Tribal's mission is to empower SMEs with next-generation payment products. In Latin America, one of the key regions, there are 62 million SMEs who are in need of cheaper and faster business-to-business payment options. This investment will advance the development of their blockchain products built on Stellar. By tapping into Stellar's growing anchor network, Tribal will be able to bring faster and more affordable cross-border payments and credit card balance settlements to their global users. It's just really exciting. We followed up that investment with a $50 million investment in AirTM, a blockchain-based payments and peer-to-peer exchange platform for multi-currency transactions in Latin America. This investment will help AirTM advance development of its robust platform by integrating with Stellar in the coming year. It's going to bring efficient, secure, and more cost-effective global financial services to businesses and to consumers. With the fragmented banking networks, Latin America remains a largely cash-based economy, but it's digitizing quickly, particularly over the last year. 13 million Visa card holders in the region made their first ever online transaction in 2020, and the pandemic has accelerated this digital transformation. So we're really excited to support AirTM as they work to solve the last mile remittance problem, making it faster and more affordable to reach end users. This also marks SDF's largest ecosystem investment to date and brings the total number of investments in Q1 and Q2 to 5. So we're working closely with Tribal and AirTM in the coming months, and we can't wait to share more developments as they come. Speaking of developments, I want to highlight a couple more portfolio companies that what they've been up to. There have been more significant strides this quarter from enterprise portfolio companies and enterprise fund portfolio companies on product releases and research. If you'll remember, we started this year off with an investment in Wire, a leading blockchain payments company operating in 50 countries. Last month, Wire launched a savings API product powered by Stellar. Now enterprises, Stellar ecosystem partners, and institutions have access to an easy on-ramp to USDC and a seamless savings API. Any wallet or fintech application can now make savings functionality with yield payouts readily available to their users with one easy integration. Earnings in Wire savings accounts are paid out monthly and compound in value. This is significant opportunity for fintech seeking to offer new functionality to users, giving them a way to earn on savings. And we're already seeing the ecosystem leverage it. AirTM, which you just heard about, is one of the first to use the Wire Savings API to expand their services available to the users. Then there's Satoshi Pay, one of the earliest adopters of Stellar and a recipient of the Enterprise Fund investment last year. In June, we awarded them one of our new research and development grants, which are grants that encourage innovation by supporting ecosystem experiments designed to extend the functionality of Stellar. To start working on Pendulum Network, a cross-chain bridge on which smart contracts could be developed and executed, which could connect Stellar to relevant chains. It's really, really exciting to support a longtime ecosystem partner as they explore this capability, especially given how the DeFi economy has grown recently. And I'm particularly interested because of the fact that it really supports the notion of interoperability. The industry hit $55 billion in total value locked in smart contracts as of June 2021. So in Satoshi Pay's own words, and I quote, Stellar is perfectly suited to serve as the missing link between traditional finance and the flourishing DeFi industry. If you've been following our work for a while, you'll know that we talk about the importance of interoperability all the time. So it's incredibly exciting for me to see when ecosystem companies take the initiative to pursue new opportunities to increase Stellar's interoperability with other networks. I love being able to shine a light on all the work happening throughout our community to foster sustainable use cases. I'm happy to take your questions on any of these updates during our Q&A, but for now, I'm going to hand it over to Candace, our General Counsel, to tell you how we're doing with the next pillar.
Thanks, Danelle. I'm Candace Kelly, the General Counsel, and I'm glad to be here with you today to talk about what we're doing to make Stellar the blockchain people know and trust. As Danelle just mentioned, a big part of our work is increasing awareness, visibility, and understanding of Stellar and the ecosystem. To support Stellar's growth, SDF markets the network and ecosystem to key audiences and participates in national and international conversations around payment technology and pertinent policy issues. This is how we get stakeholders to think of Stellar when they think of payments and financial innovation. Let's recap how we continue to get the word out about all that's happening in the ecosystem this quarter. On the news front, we continue to expand our coverage footprint within both blockchain and broader fintech media, as we have a wide range of stories to tell. Starting with our enterprise fund announcements, the AirTM investment that Danelle just mentioned was covered by CoinDesk. The Tribal Credit investment was covered by TechCrunch. We continue to amplify SDF's focus on blockchain and payments Danelle had an extended interview with Bloomberg Business Reporter on the problems with the global payment system and how blockchain can help. We're pleased to see that there's an increasing media interest in DEI in the blockchain space, and Danelle appeared on Bloomberg's Daybreak Asia to talk about diversity and inclusivity in crypto. And our VP of Engineering, Karen Chang, was interviewed for Gemini's Women in Crypto series. We also support our ecosystem partners with their own launches. Lisa Nestor, our Senior Director of Ecosystem, was interviewed by multiple outlets covering the launch of the Wire Savings API that Danelle just discussed in Miami she did that in Miami for Bitcoin 2021 and also did a Twitter takeover during that event. Overall, interest in Stellar and what we have to say continues to grow. We see this in our own metrics as well, highlighted by more than 10% growth in website traffic and 7% growth in page views. Our efforts to push out our narrative within and beyond the blockchain space carried over to our Q2 event participation as well. All told, SDF spoke at 11 external conferences and events during Q2 to drive awareness of Stellar within and beyond the blockchain space. Danelle gave a keynote at CoinDesk's Consensus about the urgent case for blockchain as a driver for financial inclusion. Consensus is one of the blockchain industry's largest forums and attended by over 10,000 people. So this was a great opportunity for us to connect our work and our mission in front of an industry audience. Danelle also participated in a University of California at San Diego panel discussion about cryptocurrency and central bank digital currency alongside Jim Kuna, who's the head of the US Federal Reserve CBDC project, and Josh Lipsky, the director of the Atlantic Council Geoeconomic Center. Our speaking appearances at Paris FinTech Forum, Lendit USA, and the Payments Canada Summit highlight our reach into broader fintech. If you're interested in learning about these events before they happen, you can always find upcoming speaking appearances on the events page on stellar.org. While we've been appearing in plenty of events, we've also been hard at work at planning our own event. We've been heads down on preparing for Stellar's third annual conference, Meridian. This is a first look at this year's design. The conversations we had last year at the virtual Meridian touched on so many diverse ideas and perspectives, and it reminded us all how invaluable it is to reach across borders and connect with one another. This year, Meridian will be held on November 17th and 18th, so mark your calendars. We're planning a virtual 2-day event around the theme, Build Locally, Impact Globally. We would have loved to get together in person this year. However, given the international nature of our work and our community, along with the continuing uncertainty about international travel, we decided we'd be missing out on a significant portion of our community if we were to move forward with an in-person event. We're hopeful that in 2022, we will be able to convene in person once again. Stay tuned for more details about this year's event. You can sign up for updates straight to your inbox at stellar.org/Meridian-conference. There are links there to some great content from past years as well. We always look forward to Meridian because it's a fantastic opportunity to align and engage with important stakeholders, including policymakers and regulators. That's where our policy team comes in, advocating for public-private partnership to shape the regulatory future of blockchain. Congressional attention to blockchain certainly ramped up this quarter. Consider this as an example. In June of this year, the US Congress had 4 blockchain-centric hearings covering CBDCs, sanctions compliance, and recent price volatility. Our policy team took advantage of this heightened policymaker interest by conducting many meetings with key offices on the House Financial Services and Senate Banking Committees. We also met with representatives of the US National Security Council and the US Agency for International Development. To support the uptick in policy activities, we've been increasing our policy resources and capabilities at SDF. We welcomed a dedicated new international policy lead to the team who will focus on CBDCs and engaging with multinational organizations. We've also deepened our engagement with the Chamber of Digital Commerce and the Global Blockchain Business Council, or GBBC, while continuing to serve in leadership roles in the Blockchain Association and the World Economic Forum. Seth Hertling, our head of policy and government relations, joined the leadership committee of the Chamber's Token Alliance. Seth and Tomer Weller, our head of partnership engineering, joined working groups of the GBBC's Global Standards Mapping Initiative 2.0. And I presented at the GBBC Post-Trade Distributed Ledger Group. The policy team was also in the news this quarter. Seth and I each published an op-ed in Cointelegraph advocating for a measured and cooperative approach to regulating blockchain and cryptocurrencies that prioritizes public-private partnerships. We engage proactively with policymakers and regulators because success in this area means more opportunities to grow and thrive. With that, I'll hand it over to Justin to talk about growth and what we did to support the network in Q2.
Thank you, Candace. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Justin Rice, SDF's head of ecosystem, and today I'm going to talk about what we're doing to ensure the robustness and usability of Stellar. So to start off, I'll share some stats about network activity and network growth. Stellar Ledger is a public record, and that means anyone can view network activity. So at SDF, we track a set of specific network metrics, and we compare them year over year to help us figure out if network usage is increasing. And the good news is, it is. When we compare Q2 2021 to Q2 2020, and that's what I mean by year over year, we can see the Stellar network usage grew by every metric. So let's take a look. First metric, total accounts. The network passed the 5 million mark in early 2021, which is 20% growth year over year. The second metric, total number of payments. There were 34.2 million payments in Q2 this year, compared to 13.2 million in Q2 of last year. That means the total number of payments grew by 159% year over year. So that means more people are creating accounts, more people are making payments. Perfect. That is exactly what we would hope to see, people making payments over the Stellar network. Those payments are also driving volume on Stellar's built-in decentralized exchange, aka the DEX. So average DEX volume surpassed 7.5 million lumens worth per day in Q2 this year. That's a big leap from Q2 of last year, when the average daily DEX volume was about 5.9 million lumens worth per day. So more DEX activity, that means more currency conversion, which means that not only are there more people making payments, but there are also more cross-currency payments. And again, that's what we'd hope to see. Now, what about just raw network activity? To measure that, we can look at the number of operations, which are the functions that change the state of the ledger. So operations include things like payments and orders to buy and sell assets. The network processed more than 430 million operations in Q2 of 2021 alone, which is 170% more than last year. So raw network activity, it's really been increasing. Now, all those metrics, they suggest that there's been a big uptick in general network usage. But to get a little more insight, we can also look at some metrics that speak directly to SDF's mission to connect global financial infrastructure. To do that, we're going to focus on what we call relevant assets. So these are assets that are tethered to real financial instruments, most of them to fiat currencies such as euros, US dollars, Argentinian pesos. So by tracking these relevant assets, we can get a sense of how well Stellar is connecting global financial systems. And the growth here is quite large. Last year, 52 assets qualified as relevant, and the total volume of relevant asset transactions was around $36.9 million for Q2. Now, since then, there's been a big jump. In Q2 of this year, 82 assets qualified as relevant, and there were about $136 million worth of relevant asset transactions. So that is a whopping 36,900% year-over-year growth in real-world, cross-border, and cross-currency transactions. The last set of metrics that I'd like to look at measure the decentralization of the network. So given the important role decentralization plays in the health and success of Stellar, we monitor the number of nodes and the amount of time it takes for those nodes to apply a transaction set and close a ledger. So let's start with that second number first, the ledger close time number, it's on the right. Even with the massive increase in network activity we've seen over the last year, the network continues to close ledgers in a little over 5 seconds. So there's more throughput, but the network is handling it really well. Overall, the decentralization of the network is fairly consistent with last year. So they're the same number of tier 1 validators. These are the nodes that have a high level of network trust and that are essential to network health and resilience. And there's also a slight increase in the total number of nodes on the network. So we constantly collaborate with the ecosystem of validators to ensure the health of the network. And one way we do that is by releasing new versions of the Stellar protocol and by coordinating validator votes to upgrade the network. So generally, that happens at most once per quarter. But this quarter, there are actually 2 network upgrades. Why 2? Okay, on April 6th, SDF's validating nodes temporarily stopped processing ledgers and the SDF Public Horizon instance stopped ingesting them. So for a brief period of time, it was unable to serve requests or submit transactions to the network. To resolve the situation, SDF's engineering team quickly spun up new nodes in the new Horizon instance. But meanwhile, since there were still enough validators available to securely process transactions, Stellar remained online. And that's a really important point, so I'm going to repeat it. The Stellar network remained online throughout this time. It continued operating as designed, and validators continued to publish archives and keep track of ledger history. That resilience demonstrates the power of decentralization. To resolve the situation, we released a new version of Stellar Core implementing Protocol 16, and on April 10th, Stellar Public Network validators voted to upgrade the network. That upgrade allowed all affected nodes, including the SDF nodes, to restore service. So what was remarkable about Protocol 16 was the speed at which it was deployed and accepted by the network. SDF engineers worked with the ecosystem to implement and release the software and coordinated the validator vote to upgrade the network, and they did it in record time. Now, we said this back in April, but it definitely bears repeating. SDF is so grateful to all the parties involved in keeping the network up and running, and we truly appreciate the fact that the ecosystem banded together to get this done. It was remarkable. Protocol 16, it was unique in that it was adopted quickly in response to a pressing need, but we were also able to implement new features in a subsequent protocol upgrade this quarter, Protocol 17. Protocol 17 introduced a new feature to Stellar called asset clawback, and that feature was developed in collaboration with Securitized, which is an ecosystem company that leverages blockchain technology to automate compliance, streamline financial transactions, and interconnect markets. Asset clawback is designed to make it easier for businesses to issue regulated financial instruments such as money market funds and bonds and equities on Stellar. To comply with securities regulatory requirements in many jurisdictions, these issuers must demonstrate the ability to revoke assets in certain situations, and this new feature allows them to do just that. Issuers of clawback-enabled assets, they can take advantage of the feature to recover assets that have been fraudulently obtained, respond to regulatory actions, and enable identity-proofed persons to recover an asset in the event of key custody, loss, or theft. Clawback does not affect existing assets or balances or accounts. Rather, it paves the way for a whole new class of Stellar asset. We're excited to see how businesses take advantage of the new feature to extend the network's reach and to further provide equitable access to the world's financial infrastructure. Finally, I'm pleased to highlight the latest proposal to add a new feature to the Stellar protocol. There's already just a ton of excitement in the community about this. CAP 38, automated market makers. So just quick definition, new Stellar features start as core advancement proposals, CAPs for short. These are technical blueprints that are openly discussed, vetted, and implemented in Stellar Core, and assuming they make it that far, they're included in a major protocol release that's put up for validator vote. CAP 38, its goal is to improve overall network liquidity by introducing automated market makers, or AMMs, to Stellar, and it has officially been deemed ready for implementation. CAP 38 connects to a larger goal that's part of the SDF 2021 roadmap, which is to improve liquidity on the network. That's a goal because market liquidity, which allows the quick and efficient exchange of assets at stable and transparent prices, is fundamental to the network's success. The idea behind CAP 38 is that AMMs could supplement the liquidity currently provided by the DEX, Stellar's built-in order books. And based on what we've seen on other decentralized networks, they have the potential to turn market making into an accessible, simple, and inclusive process. So if validators vote to accept the new protocol, again, all major networks upgrades require validator consent, users will be able to create liquidity pools, which will coexist alongside the order books, and path payment operations will begin to compare the two and execute against whichever provides the best rate. So users will also be able to deposit capital into and withdraw capital from those pools. We believe that introducing a parallel method for exchange will enable more cheap, fast, highly usable cross-asset payments and democratize market making by giving everyone the ability to participate in liquidity provision. But really, it's up to the ecosystem. So there's a lot to do before the network upgrade vote can happen. So for now, I'll just say our team is working hard behind the scenes to prepare, and we're excited for what comes next. Cap 38 was definitely the most high-profile proposal this quarter, but we also made great progress on other key standards that connect the ecosystem and ensure the network is responsive to its needs. Quick refresher, Stellar Ecosystem Proposals, aka SEPs, are specifications that allow ecosystem participants to build extra network infrastructure so they can interoperate easily to facilitate multi-party transactions. CAPs, I've already mentioned, these are the technical suggestions for changing the protocol itself to expand Stellar's functionality to meet ecosystem needs. And together, these two sets of proposals are a good indication not only of where Stellar is right now, but also of where it's headed next. And there was notable progress on both fronts this quarter. So let's talk about SEP 23. SEP 23 defines a standard method for handling multiplexed accounts, aka muxed accounts. And these make it easier for businesses to map a single pooled Stellar account to multiple users. This quarter, it was completed and marked active, and it lays the groundwork for ecosystem-wide collaboration to support this new feature and extend the robustness and usability of Stellar. There were also major improvements to SEP 38, which defines a protocol for creating uniform request for quote, or RFQ APIs. So this would allow anchors to provide price quotes to counterparties so they can easily accept off-chain assets in exchange for different on-chain assets and vice versa, and it too could help improve overall network liquidity. Finally, there was also significant progress made on the draft of CAP 21, a proposal that suggests some changes to generalized transaction preconditions, which can make managing sequence numbers easier and also allow the addition of things like relative time locks. Now, I know that's quite technical. Key thing to note, those changes can pave the way for creating payment channels on top of Stellar, and payment channels can significantly improve network throughput. SEPs and CAPs, they come about based on feedback from businesses building on Stellar, and they evolve in part based on input from the community. And the community is where I'd like to conclude today. Stellar is home to a motivated community of developers and entrepreneurs and enthusiasts, and they really do work together to build the future of finance. So to foster the community, SDF has several ongoing initiatives aimed at supporting new projects, educating developers, and encouraging any and all to participate in important discussions. Here are some highlights from Q2. The Stellar Community Fund, which is an open competition that awards Lumen grants with input from the community, saw record participation this quarter. 58 projects entered and 8 winners were awarded Lumen grants, totaling 5 million lumens. The winning use cases range from enterprise payment processing to DeFi protocols to legally binding e-signatures. And these are all projects solving real-world problems for real-world users, and we are excited to see what they do next. Also, submissions for the next community fund are open now, so I highly encourage anyone out there listening to apply. It's really a great way to kickstart a Stellar-based project. We also sponsored 3 hackathons to encourage new development. Encode Club's Hack the System concluded by awarding 3 new Stellar-based projects with Lumen grants, and Encode Club's Hack Africa is currently accepting submissions, as is the Minority Programmer Association's DeFi Summer Hackathon. So these hackathons, they're a great way to inspire new developers and to get the word out about what they can build on Stellar. And many of the projects that start in hackathons, they continue to develop and grow. Finally, Stellar Quest 3, which is the 3rd series in the gamified intro to Stellar that teaches people through hands-on coding challenges, concluded this quarter. And this series surpassed our expectations. Over 1,500 developers completed challenges, and an inspired group of Stellar Questers continues to convene on a dedicated Discord server to collaborate, provide support, and share ideas about what to do next. It's really a thriving and informed community. And that feels like a good place to end our program content. So I will turn it back over to Carolyn for Q&A.
Thank you, Justin, and thank you, Danelle and Candace as well for those presentations. Just as a reminder, please submit any questions in the Q&A in your toolbar, and we'll get to as many as we can. But first, I'm going to start with the question for Danelle that came in. Just a couple days ago, SDF announced that Liquid Global Exchange will list Stellar USDC, which is amazing news. Are you planning to list Stellar USDC in centralized exchanges in the USA, such as Coinbase, Kraken, etc.?
Thank you, Carolyn, and thanks for the question. I mean, we would love that to happen. We want USDC to be listed on USDC Stellar to be listed on as many exchanges as possible. Our BD team is working with lots of exchanges to be able to try to make that happen, not necessarily just focused on the US, focused globally so that we can have that access globally. But it's an awesome opportunity for an easy on and off ramp. And for easy access to USDC from the end user, whether that be a business or a consumer. So we would love to see these things happen, and we're continuing to the BD team is continuing to work on it, and we'll have some, hopefully some more news in the next quarter around other exchanges that are focused on it as well.
Thanks, Danelle. Another question, and this one is for Candace. What is the objective behind all the policy conversations SDF has been having lately?
Well, great question. The policy conversations are heated up around the world. I gave an example of the US Congress having 4 hearings just in June that were crypto-centric, but it's not just in the United States. And in recognition of that, and the global conversation, whether it's with policymakers, lawmakers, or central banks, we, as I mentioned, added Gabriel Bizama is the name of our new international policy lead. And he is a regulatory lawyer who's focused on financial inclusion and fintech regulation and policy. And he comes to us with a wealth of experience. He's worked at World Bank Group, he's worked at the UN, he's worked for the Treasury, Ministry of Treasury in Argentina, and he's led the financial inclusion agenda under Argentina's G20 presidency. So he has been here for only a few weeks, and he has hit the ground running and just expanded those conversations. And they're so important because as the governments are understanding more and more, and those public-private conversations that we keep emphasizing are happening, we are really hoping that we're going to shape positive regulation going forward. And so we can further our goal of creating equitable access to the global financial system through well-informed policy and lawmaking. So it's a really important agenda for us.
Thanks, Candace. Another one here, this one is probably for Justin. How do I create a liquidity pool on Stellar now that you've introduced AMMs?
This is a really good question. And I think I just want to clarify where we are in the process of introducing AMMs to Stellar. So as I mentioned, any change to the Stellar protocol starts as a technical proposal, and that technical proposal will be implemented in Stellar Core and then released as a major version of Stellar Core. So this will be Stellar Core v 18.0.0, which is then put forth to the network for validator consent. If the validators vote to upgrade the network, that version of the protocol runs live on the network. Now, we right now are basically in the implementation phase. So there's still a lot of, there's still time to actually implement that code to Stellar Core and to actually put it out there on the test net and give people time to actually assess what it does, to upgrade their software and to prepare for that vote. And during that time, there's also a lot of work downstream from Stellar Core that needs to happen. So Horizon, the Stellar API, needs to be updated to be able to give people access to AMMs. The Stellar SDKs need to be updated. And then ultimately the ecosystem is starting to think about how to build interfaces that would give users access. And it's really going to be up to, in terms of like how a user will interact with these liquidity pools, there's a lot of great work that the ecosystem is doing, companies in the ecosystem outside of SDF, to start to think about this problem, to give access points. And so ultimately those sort of downstream user-facing applications will be built by them. And I think we're really excited to see what kinds of solutions they provide to give people that access.
Awesome, thanks, Justin. Candace, another one here for you. What are the implications of SDF strengthening its relationship with traditional financial institutions like Ukraine? What's the end goal there?
Thanks for that question. So I think one thing that is very important to the Stellar ecosystem is that we are trying to improve and strengthen the existing financial system and the global payments standards, not to replace them. And so it's very important for us that we have these conversations with financial institutions, just as we're having the conversations with policymakers and lawmakers, because we do think that there is a huge value to using permissionless distributed ledger technology to improve, the very things that the Ukrainian government is aiming for, which is fewer cash payments, more financial inclusion, and a more secure and fast and transparent payment technology. And so that's the goal, is to make sure that as financial institutions are looking to this technology, that we as folks who really understand the technology are in those conversations. And so as they're making decisions, they're doing it with facts and not based on rumors or myths about what this technology can and can't do. So it's very exciting to have be involved in these conversations, to know that the folks who have this ability to make these changes are talking to the right people, and getting the technical and legal and policy standpoint from the ecosystem.
Thanks, Candace. Okay, this one is for Justin. SDF recently announced a partnership with Satoshi Pay and Pendulum. Can you explain how this will expand the Stellar ecosystem?
Good question. So a lot of the innovation in the ecosystem is driven not by SDF, but by the companies that are building on Stellar, and Satoshi Pay and Pendulum is a great example. Essentially, they thought, what could we do to allow smart contracts and sort of to connect to Stellar? So could we build a bridge to another network that would allow people to basically execute smart contracts on the Stellar network by connecting through that bridge? And they sat down and started to think about how to prototype it. And really all of that development is being led by them, and it's coming from their brains, from their innovation, and from their desire to see the network succeed, and their belief, as Danelle quoted, that Stellar is a really, that connecting Stellar to DeFi has real advantages for the ecosystem. What we at SDF have done very recently is that we launched an R&D grants program that helps people build out these kinds of prototypes. It's for very well scoped proofs of concept. The grants are sort of small one-time grants, and they're open application. We actually just posted them on the website. And so you can actually go there and sort of see the questions that we would ask before providing one of these grants. And our goal there is really to encourage and support ecosystem innovation. But it's really important to note that these innovations, including Pendulum, they're coming from Satoshi Pay. They're coming from ecosystem participants. And a lot of the future of Stellar and a lot of what Stellar needs to do, that's decided by how people are using it, how people are building on it, and by the ecosystem itself.
Okay, great. Thank you, Justin. Another question is, I have noticed that Hot Wallet too has started using USDC as well as XLM. What does this mean? Danelle, would you like to take this one?
Sure. And I just want to add on to also what Justin just talked about. One of the coolest things about open source and about our project is the fact that we don't actually build in the United States, for example, for something happening in another country. The other folks in the other countries build. So we think about them building locally to impact the global economy. And so what we're seeing even with CAP 38 and just the involvement in the ecosystem is real ideation that's coming from outside of the Stellar Development Foundation that we can actually support. So it's just super awesome to see these things in the Satoshi Pay program. Pendulum is one of the other areas of that. So on this question, this is also the beauty of blockchain in terms of transparency, and also how we really try hard to be able to be very transparent about what we're doing. So we've begun making certain dollar payments with USDC instead of using fiat USDC. For example, we've made some grant payments in this way. Over time, you're going to notice that we hope to do much more of this because of the speed and simplicity of making USDC payments. So we use Hot Wallet too for these types of payments. And so stay tuned, keep watching. We're going to try to actually make this more of something that we can actually leverage for all of the folks that we support in the ecosystem through grant payments and other payments out there.
Great, thanks, Danelle. And Candace, maybe you'd like to take this one. Can you become a Stellar anchor in a country if you are not a bank?
Yes, you can. You don't have to be a bank, but as Danelle just mentioned, in terms of we rely on local entities to follow the local regulations in your own country. So it may not be a bank, but you're probably going to you'll have to make sure that you understand what the rules are with respect to money transmission or e-money, or exactly how cryptocurrency and stablecoins are being regulated in your country, and make sure that you have the adequate licenses. That doesn't necessarily mean, and in many cases does not mean, having to be a full-fledged bank, but certainly making sure you're mindful and compliant with the local regulations is critical.
Thanks, Candace. Maybe we'll do one more. Justin, this one is for you. What prompted the latest changes to the Stellar Community Fund? What kinds of projects is SCF looking for?
The Stellar Community Fund is an ongoing program, and we run it several times a year. And after every round, we basically pause and collect feedback from the community. And we use that to inform the process, so it's iterative. After the last round, we got some really good suggestions, and we decided to try them out this round. The sort of two main suggestions are allowing projects to specify budget requests, and then to have voters evaluate those requests as part of the voting process. And the other one was to basically refine the voting process just to simplify it. So we're simplifying voting, and we're allowing budget requests. The reason why we're doing those things is, again, because we want to evolve the program so that it meets the community's needs. And these ideas, like especially the budget request idea, what they allow for is for the program to support different scales of projects. So you can, if you have a big project, you can request more. If you have a tiny project, you can request less. And so to answer the question of what kinds of projects does the community fund support, it is projects of all scopes and sizes, because you self-select your budget. But in terms of what it actually ends up supporting, it's really up to the community, right? The community ultimately votes on the winning projects. And so part of the process is that you, when you create the project, you fill out your application and you sort of interact with the community and explain to them what it is that you're building. Generally, I think the community tends to favor real world use cases that solve real world problems that are well explained and well scoped. And they like people who are putting in effort, and it seems like they're going to build projects that are going to be around for a while. But again, anything more specific than that really has to do with sort of like what's going on in the greater ecosystem. And so the best way to figure out the kinds of projects that the community is looking for is to get in there and start interacting with people who are in the Stellar community.
Well said, Justin. Thank you. I'm actually going to throw one more question in there, and then we're going to wrap. Danelle, what milestones have been achieved with Franklin Templeton, and what are the next steps on this partnership?
Oh, it's so great to see what Franklin Templeton, they've been doing. They're continuing to work on their project. The coolest thing that I saw this quarter was the fact that they're running 3 validators now on the network. And so that's awesome. And we love to see that. We think folks who are participating in the network and who have value on the network should actually want to participate in the governance of the network, which is essentially what running the validator helps you to do. As Justin said many times, you get to help to decide the future of the network and what proposals are accepted. So they're still continuing to work on the project. They're now running their validators, and we look forward to working with them just to see their project grow. It's been a lot of fun so far. And also, I just love the fact that, and most of you might have noticed that Justin in almost every quarter gets to say all these amazing percentages of growth that he gets to use, and percentages that you would never normally hear outside of this call, because they're in the thousands of percent. So it's awesome to see that kind of growth in the network as well.
Definitely agree, Danelle. Okay, that is all the time we have for Q&A today. So thank you all so much for taking the time to join us. You can watch out for the recap on SDF's blog later today. That'll have the webinar recording and the link to the full Q2 report. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next quarter. Bye, everyone.